Hey guys, welcome back to Punching Sideways. Today's episode is with none other than local tennis legend Shayne Ried. So Shayne's legendary status in border tennis was actually earned off the court. Shayne's the head curator of the Albury grass courts and also the Wodonga Tennis Centre. He's also the longtime president of the Bullioh Football Club, so he's really entrenched in local sport. He's also an absolute champion guy. So this was a super fascinating chat. Shout out to Mel for making it happen. And yeah, I won't hold you up anymore here at the start. Let's jump into the conversation.
So I know Shayne from, he's married to one of my good friends growing up, Emma. And I didn't realise all the impressive things he did until after they got together, I must say. And then I was like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense now. That's how he got Emma, because Emma's Emma. That's what I'm going to say. Shayne, for those of us that are listening right now that don't know who you are, can you just sort of explain where you grew up, firstly?
Yeah, so thanks very much for having me here today. I'm a local lad, grew up in Toowoomba Valley, same as you did, Mel. So spent my primary school years at Toowoomba Valley School and then went into Toowoomba High School, which became Toowoomba Secondary College. Completed that, then moved into town and began greenkeeping at the Wodonga Tennis Centre. And that was back in 1995 and still doing it back in 2023. So it's been an extended period.
So the greenkeeping thing, where did that come about? Had you always wanted to do it, or had you sort of just fallen into it?
Yeah, look, it's something I probably fell into, to be honest. Like when I was at home, I was like any kid, loved mowing the lawns and stuff like that, but I certainly had no aspirations growing up to get into tennis, greenkeeping or anything like that. I first left when I finished Year 12. I did a couple of months as a boilermaker welder, and that just wasn't for me. You know, overalls inside the shed, stuck inside. It was hot and it was horrible. I just hated it. So an apprenticeship come up at Wodonga, and just by chance I applied and was lucky enough to get the job at the time, and met some really good people along the way, and then my career kind of grew from there. So I've been very fortunate that I did start at Wodonga and then was able to go to Sydney and over to London and back again. So yeah, it's been phenomenal.
So when you talk about your career progressing, I don't feel like it's necessarily something that people would think there would be a progression for greenkeeping per se, like from this area or anything like that. You're like, oh, you're just mowing grass basically. So how did it sort of evolve into the opportunities that we're going to talk about a little bit?
Yeah, well, it's a really good point, and a lot of people in all jobs do get stuck, doing in the one job, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that either. But I started, and I always wanted to travel, and there was always thought there was bigger things in mind. I love tennis, watching tennis. So I was very fortunate. We had a tournament back in Wodonga in 1999, and the courts at the time were pretty ordinary, to be fair. So we got in. The club got in Murray McFarlane, who was a turf consultant who had worked at Wodonga from 1992 to 1995, but he was from White City. He was probably one of the first guys on an international level. He travelled all over the country doing consulting for Davis Cups and things like that. So Murray come down, oversaw 12 months to get our courts up for a big veterans tournament. We struck up a relationship, got on really well, and he said, look, why don't you come to Sydney and work at White City? And at the time he was doing Davis Cups all over Australia. So very fortunate to work at White City, which is very sad to see what's happened to White City now. It's very dilapidated, but it was the equivalent to Kooyong. All the Davis Cups were played there. So it was great working there, but, travelled all over Australia, Davis Cup, and then that's probably, progressed further, able to go overseas from there as well.
So, sorry, was it Murray?
Murray McFarlane, who is living back on the border now. Okay. But if it wasn't for Murray and that tournament, probably in 1998, who knows, I may not have even still in the game or been given the opportunity.
So just if I got the timeline right, Shayne, you were only 3 years in at that point. Mm-hmm. What do you think he saw in you specifically? I'm assuming he was meeting lots of young, possibly even still apprentice greenskeepers at that point. What do you think it was that he saw in you that he wanted you to come and see these bigger opportunities?
I guess he saw that someone was, passionate about something that he was as well, hardworking, I'd like to think. But, we struck up a good relationship, which is always half the battle, when you work together and things like that. And, it's hard enough to find people in general that, want to work outdoors. It is a grind at times. It's hot, it's dusty, and things like that. So he could see that I was keen to do the work and, would I like to go to Sydney? I said absolutely. And yeah, so the rest is history, I guess.
So we're in Sydney. You're in amongst all these athletes playing tennis. What was that feeling like being on a court with, or like having helped curate a court for some of the athletes that maybe you'd been watching on TV?
Yeah, it was a bit surreal. I think the first event I was lucky enough to go along as Murray's sidekick was 1999 up in Brisbane. It was Australia versus Russia. So Leighton Hewitt was only 17 at the time, and he was playing Yevgeny Kafelnikov, who was number one in the world. Murat Safin was there. So that was a packed house, semi-final, 13,000 people at ANZ Stadium. It was just phenomenal to see. I loved it. I felt very fortunate to be there. Paddy Rafter was injured at the time, but he was there as well. Wayne Arthurs played, Todd Woodbridge. So, yeah, it was just great to be part of. Every event that you work on, particularly when it's Davis Cup Tennis Australia, you're part of the team and you're treated as such. And, it's just a phenomenal thing. Any of the big tournaments are great to be involved in.
What's your motivation?
I do love the sport of tennis. I love watching tennis, like I said before, but you always just try and improve on what you do. Like each year, you'd like to think the courts are reasonable, but, you're always thinking there's ways to do it better. Has got not harder and harder, but the standards for what players want now compared to 30 years ago are dramatically higher. It used to be serve, volley. If there was a bad bounce, it's grass, who cares? But now, unfortunately, most of the kids spend 95% of their time hitting on hard courts and synthetic. So if they do get a ball that probably plays the way it should, they think it's a bad bounce as such. They don't come to the net. So it's all rallies. So the standards have been driven higher because of the type of tennis that is played. So you're always trying to improve. I enjoy it. And I get to work for myself outdoors. So it's not all bad, I guess.
So you've brought up something that I was going to talk about later, but it's probably an appropriate time. I guess firstly, is there something specifically about grass courts that fascinates you? And with the baseline to baseline game and how much depth players are trying to play with now, I'm assuming, as you mentioned, the expectation that the actual baseline will hold up to a lot more athleticism and pressure and work is much higher for you than what it would have been in the past, where people were moving around more of the court. Yeah,
certainly in terms of the wear to the court. Now it's all focused on the baseline, like you said, so you do get a lot more traffic there. The old style of tennis, when they were coming to the net, it was actually good for the court to, it would firm it up, play better. You see like a Jade Cole, for example, who's a local gun player, he'll still play the old style, the proper, the way I believe.
The proper play.
Well, that style is more conducive to grass court tennis. In terms of have I got a passion for the grass? Yes, no, but I've just got a passion for my work and a passion for tennis because I do enjoy it.
Oh, nice.
Let's talk who's on your wall at home. If you like us, like I like us, get onto punchingsideways.com, give us a bit of a likesy, have a bit of an exploration around and maybe buy us a coffee. Let's talk who's on your wall at home.
Well, it got taken down recently when the house got painted. But, Roger Federer is my absolute hero. I was lucky enough to meet him in 2003, the year he won Wimbledon, just to shake his hand and say hello, which was pretty special. I'll never forget that. But I love Roger. I love the way he plays, love what he's done for the sport, on and off the court. He epitomises everything you'd like to see in a sporting legend. But he's my hero. Now he doesn't play. I'll be honest. I don't watch it as much as I did because it was just everything that I enjoyed watching.
Let's talk about Wimbledon now, just because you've just brought it up. How did this little tap on the shoulder happen? How did you get from being just floating around Albury-Wodonga, maybe travelling around Australia a little bit, to heading over to London and doing something as significant as Wimbledon?
Yeah, look, the All England Lawn Tennis Club, Wimbledon, they take on 3 to 6 overseas groundsmen a year on temporary staff. So I sent off a resume. There's lots of other Aussies that have done it as well, been fortunate enough to work there. Obviously, at the time, I had a tennis background, so it went favourably, sent that off. Eddie Seward was the head groundsman at the time, has unfortunately passed away a few years ago. It was accepted, so went over and worked 2001, had an absolute ball. It's an amazing place to work, but amazing city, and then got invited back the years after that. So it was, great. I've mentioned it many times. It's just a great time of my life. I love working there. You're based in London, Europe, but I instead of travelling around, I was happy to go to work every day of the week. I just loved going there. I knew it wouldn't last forever in terms of my visa, so every day I could be at work. I just enjoyed being there, so it was phenomenal.
So you've obviously lived that life, so for you it felt more day-to-day, and you obviously appreciated the experience, whereas I was telling Mel that, to me, there's a romanticism about Wimbledon, particularly that centre court, that there's just a magic to that place. And to me, it's the most important piece of grass on the planet. And I was watching just randomly the new LG TVs at my work showing pictures of the Novak Kyrgios final, and the court just looks absolutely magic. So I've been thinking all week whether you would have that same romanticism, and I don't know whether Mel told you, but I'm a tennis nut, whether you feel the same way having just been there on the ground, or whether you still do when you see pictures of the court.
Absolutely. I think it's the most special place in the world. I absolutely love Wimbledon. You see the pictures, it's phenomenal. One of my really good mates is the head groundsman, Neil Stubley, phenomenal guy. It's incredible what he's gone on and done. And, from when I was there to now, the courts and everything is just absolutely incredible. It's gone to another level. It used to be, I remember, there'd be a match on centre court and we'd be all stuck inside watching a replay of Borg and McEnroe, and you're just captivated by watching on TV whilst you're at Wimbledon. The history of the place it's unbelievable. I think it's the most special tennis precinct on the planet. I don't think many people would disagree, to be honest.
What's your preference to play on?
Grass for sure. It's easier on the body. I'm not much of a tennis player, but if I had my choice, I'd always choose grass. But just back to Wimbledon, if I got the chance to go back, which hopefully I do in the next few years, just to say good day, I would be just as excited, the next time I went as I first went in 2001. It's just that's how special that place is.
Well, can I ask you a question about that? I had 2 questions. Which early match were you, I guess, primarily in charge of a court where the pressure was on, okay, this is basically my baby for X number of weeks or however many months it's taken to prepare it? And also, what is in your opinion, the most enjoyable match you've seen in person at Wimbledon?
Yeah. First year, 2001, I did courts 11, 12 and 13. In 2002, I was fortunate enough I did centre court number 1. That was a year late and won, so that was very special. Easily the most special match I seen at Wimbledon was Pat Rafter versus Andre Agassi. They played each other 3 years in a row. Rafter lost a quarter in 2000 and won 2 semis in 5 sets against Andre Agassi. Absolutely phenomenal matches. And then to see Roger beat Philippoussis and then Roddick in 3 and 4 was pretty spectacular. So, Henman had some massive matches against Goran in 2001, went over 3 days. So, it's best tennis players in the world. You're going to see phenomenal matches, but they're certainly the ones that stand out.
Okay, and in saying that, I think anyone who's really into tennis will know, and it happens a lot at the Australian Open in the first week, that some of the side courts that maybe people aren't paying attention to on the TV will often produce these just outlier, absolutely incredible matches. So you were on, courts 11, 12, 13, was it?
Well, having said that, you would do the mowing and be responsible for that. But once that was all set up, all the permanent and temporary staff we'd be on centre court.
Right, okay.
So, you'd be responsible for court covering and stuff like that. So you do the early preparations and then we would move, the majority go to centre court and the others would head to court 1 and then there was court coverers around the rest of the grounds.
Yeah, because I was just wondering how involved you were on those side courts, for the lack of a better term, throughout the tournament, or whether it's just set those and then let's focus on the main courts.
Yeah, that's how it works, absolutely. So set up, I'm sure it's still the same over there now. they would have their guys do the mowing and marking, and then they would head to centre court. Everyone wants to be on centre court. It's just that simple.
It's funny. When we had Craig O'Shaughnessy on, that was the first time that I'd personally heard your name, Shayne. He said that you were somehow involved in an opportunity where he got to put the post in on centre court. That wasn't you?
No, that was another guy. Actually, he started in 2002, Grant Canton.
Okay.
He was second in charge at the time when Craig did that, put the nets up. So he would be the only individual on the planet in the history of the world that's put the net post in other than a ground star. Okay. So it's pretty spectacular.
So I guess where I was leading to is, did you ever have that opportunity? Did you ever or on any of the courts at Wimbledon, did you put the net posts up?
Look,
which might sound silly to people that aren't into tennis, but it's kind of like a special privilege at that particular event.
Yes, there was certainly, like, we're going back a long way, but there was guys that actually did that. I remember one day I thought I'll get involved, and I think I nearly got pushed out of the way because I think there was 3 guys that did set those courts, centre court up in particular. So certainly was there plenty of times when it was going up, that's for sure. But it's very militant, so well run. They do a phenomenal job. It's just like clockwork, amazing.
Yep. You're talking about the prep. So can you just talk me through the actual prep? Like, everyone likes watching the tennis, but the actual work that goes into getting it to look like that. Like, are we talking you got to change the different types of grasses, like rolling, like do you test how stable it is and have to add things to it? Like what sort of goes into just on a base level?
So like locally, like Albury-Wodonga. So
Shayne's in charge of the Albury-Wodonga courts. Can you just quickly just chat?
So I guess the most important thing is to try and get an even coverage of grass. I've had my problems this year at Albury with how wet they were and things like that, so it's probably not as perfect as it normally is. Get an even coverage of grass with a limited thatch, which is organic material, so you don't want too much cushion between the actual grass and the soil, so you try and get your even bounce. So that, like, once a year should do a renovation, which is thatch removal. I don't want to get too bogged down because people won't really understand what I'm talking about.
Our audience actually likes this stuff.
Yeah, like the actual details.
So having the thatch removal, and that's probably the key. Have a 100% cover of grass, limited thatch, get your mowing heights down to around 3 or 4 mil.
Yeah.
And then, you just got to keep on top of it. You got all your fungicides, pesticides, herbicides. So it is really intense. Albury and Wodonga, I think I was saying to a friend of mine the other day, they are really high maintenance grass courts because they're just the original. They were just thrown together 50, 60 years ago. No drainage. The soil that was there is there. It all varies, and it's just a common couch.
Yeah.
So you do have a lot of problems that other clubs who have rebuilt their courts and brought in new grass don't probably have the same sort of problems. So in terms of learning and, all the situations I've been put in with, consulting or doing Davis Cups, you kind of know a lot of stuff because of the grounding I've had here in Albury-Wodonga. But it is very intense. 12 months out, you should be looking at your renovations and then keep your mowing, watering and all that up to date. But there is lots, when you got tournaments, we got 15 days straight at Wodonga, which is a lot of tennis, 150 hours of play, which, there wouldn't be a soccer pitch in Albury-Wodonga in 12 months to get that, for example. So that's how intense it is. So you obviously got to have it healthy, plant health, and, want them hard, but you still got to have enough water in so they survive the distance. So it is quite complex, but the higher you go, the harder it gets and the more complex it gets.
So it's fascinating that you kind of mentioned in there that your skills base for dealing with problems hasn't come from these larger tournaments and worked down to Albury-Wodonga. You're actually gaining knowledge here right on the border that you're actually able to help theoretically bigger and better courts deal with. Like that's
what I was thinking too. Yeah.
Yeah, look, people might say, that's a load of rubbish, but it's actual facts, Probably looking after the Albury grass courts has probably been the best learning that I've had through my whole experience, because anything that can go wrong with turf, with couch, grass will go wrong there. Yeah. So if I see it somewhere else, I'll know because of that experience. And that's not being critical of Albury because they're a phenomenal club and phenomenal courts, but sometimes you can learn the most at a smaller level and use that at the highest level. But, there's obviously things I've taken, court construction and things like that from, building courts for Davis Cup and stuff as well, that I wouldn't have had the experience locally. So,
When you say, so 15 days straight of tennis, what happens at the end of each day? Do you have to cover it, or like, is it just depend? Like, do you take the weather, like check the humidity? Is all that factor into what you're putting on the grass after the day, or how does it sort of work? Because I am actually curious to.
Yeah, look, it's a really good point. Like, I've got 2 tournaments going at the moment. I've got the Australian Nationals 12s and 14s in Wodonga. I've got Margaret Court Cup in Albury. So after play, been lining service and baselines, which is necessary. You know, we spoke before about the wear and tear on the baseline, so that's necessary to do. Last night I watered at Wodonga because we have such an extended period that we've got to play. But that is based on the forecast. If it was humid and there were storms around, I wouldn't water. So in terms of covering, 55 courts we don't have covers for, but Davis Cup, Wimbledon courts are covered regardless of a forecast and things like that. Tonight I'll mow the courts in Wodonga, hopefully get enough time to get back and try and line the service and baselines at Albury as well. But yeah, there's always plenty going on in the morning. If it was dewy, you've got to take the dew off.
How do you take the dew off?
There's dew brooms, things like that. So you drag around behind a mower or walk it off. All the wind has been a bit frustrating for the players. And in Wodonga, we've got the farcical situation with the pine trees blowing litter all over the courts. But one thing it does, you don't have the dew in the morning. So, there's advantages there as well. But you just got to try and make the courts strong enough that they can survive getting through that amount of tennis.
You said before, Shayne, that the Albury courts went down 50 or 60 years ago, or however long that was. With the Wodonga courts, is that a newer base that you're working with there?
Albury are older. I think it might have been in the 40s that they first started playing there. Wodonga, I think they're over about 55 years old, but probably the soil varies more at Wodonga and they're a bit more up and down.
For people that aren't 100% familiar with this area, how far apart are they? 7 Ks maybe?
Yeah, 7 Ks.
And they vary that much?
Yeah, well, Albury, probably got that black wickets, river soil, so there is a difference there, and Wodonga's, where it is located, so just whatever soil was there originally, it's just had some grass put on top and some fences put around it, and that's what we got with.
And when it comes to, it just sparked something in my mind, were these locations chosen for convenience? Was the space available? Were they actually looking for a certain kind of soil?
Look, it's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that. In Wodonga, I think the availability of the land was the reason. And I think that, they started with a heap of buckshot clay courts, and then they said, there's an area, so they whacked some grass down and went from there. The history of the Albury Tennis Association is fascinating. I'm not the right one to explain it all, but that area was owned by a family. They played tennis and they sold it to the association. And so that was the family who started playing tennis there on that land. And so I don't think they chose it specifically because of soil or anything like that, but it is a great spot. It's near the river, central Albury. It's phenomenal, really. Prize bit of real estate land.
Yes. Shayne, with the courts, and because I want to talk a bit more about all your other things that you do within the community, because you're not just tennis, but is it just the fact that, I shouldn't say just the fact, but there's things that are booked 12 months ahead, that the potential for actually digging everything up and starting again, is it a monetary thing, or is it just more the time and the resource to facilitate these competitions that is stopping any sort of actual redevelopment of them?
Yeah, another good question. It's probably all of the above. Like, the cost to do these things is huge. Construction these days, to do the required work would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. But also, you've got a certain amount of comps on, like if you were to take your courts out of action, you've got a fair bit of income to make up and, guarantee to get those players back. But look, having said that, would I like the courts all laser level, new grass? Absolutely. It would make life a lot easier. But, the courts are still at a pretty good level that most people that come here are, that they wouldn't be thinking that they need to be ripped up and rebuilt. So would it make them 5% better? Probably. But, for that amount of money and that time without grass courts, would that justify? Maybe not. So.
And just one other, your favourite journey that you've watched throughout the Albury-Wodonga courts of tennis? Like people that you've been part of their journey and watched them sort of grow and get into bigger and better things per se.
Yeah,
look, Albury-Wodonga has been a phenomenal breeding ground for tennis players. Like you go, the sad passing of Rex Hartwick, he grew up, he's from Culcan, but, he played down at the Albury Grass Courts, Margaret Court. We have a phenomenal history with tennis. Obviously, Sam Groth, who just got into Parliament, which is very exciting for Grothy. Seeing him come through as a junior and then go on and make, 53 in the world, which is, a phenomenal effort for Grothy. He's done so well for himself with his media as well. Locally, a guy like Mark Shanahan, he's such a talent. You could watch him play at Albury, and then, he's so good to watch. You could watch him on TV the next day and think, he's in the top 50 in the world. That's just the quality that he brings, the style. So it's been great to watch him play. Colfie, another great friend of mine. He's won so many tournaments. Kenny Wirtz, he's obviously older than me, but what a champion. I think he's won nearly 100 titles all around the, New South Wales and Victoria. So to be able to see that and, when tournaments are on, it's been, a pleasure to, sit down the courts, with Shanners and Colfie, Cameron Marr and people like this and, watch them play. And it really is. It's a great time of year. And we're very fortunate to have those, blokes that have, supported our tournaments and played at such a high level.
Okay. So Tallangatta Valley, you grew up Tallangatta Valley and you were a very big part of the re-initiation, I'm going to call, of the Bullioh Football Club that was based around, or that is currently based there. What was the reasoning behind that? And is it a sport love? Like you're just that much into sport and community that you just want to get everything going? Or, can you just fill us in a little bit on why that was so important to you?
Yeah, look, I can't take any of the credit for getting the club reformed. Bluey Campbell was the driving force behind that, He got the club going along with his family, people like Roger Burns and that were heavily involved. I was actually in Sydney at the time. I did come home when they had the big AGM to decide that they were going to reform it. So, look, there was a huge push from the community once, Bluey had floated the idea and they did a huge amount of work to get it up and going. I did play some games in 2002, 3, and then, got heavily involved, become president. I took on vice president, I think, in 5 and 6, and then took on president role in 2007. So, look, my father was heavily involved with Bullioh. I don't know, it's just in the blood, I think. I just love it. It's strange to have a president of the Bullioh Football Club that lives in town and travels back, up to footy training on Thursday nights, and I don't play anymore. But, look, my mother, the same. She loves it. My brother, my sister, Kerry. So, I don't know, it's just in the DNA. The club kind of means a lot to us, but it also brings a lot of joy to a lot of people. So it's phenomenal to be involved. And, we've been really successful since we've been reformed, on field. We've won a lot of premierships. But probably the legacy thing, we've got a new building, community building, which, we all should be very proud of. I know myself, we worked really hard to get that. We've got brand new netball courts as well up there. That just doesn't happen overnight. You've got to work around the clock to get that. You've got to raise money. You've got to get the support from government, things like that. But, look, it's just a legacy thing, and it's just so good that there's something going in Tallangatta Valley. We don't have a school up there anymore. All the kids go into town. If it wasn't for the footy club, you just wouldn't see any of the local people, which would be quite sad, but it's a meeting place and something I'm pretty passionate about, that the Valley needs something, the community needs something.
So I grew up in Corryong, so I did my football. I was never a very good footballer, and I wasn't really that big a football person, but we were in the Upper Murray Football League. Was that the league that Bullioh first went back into, or? Yeah,
so Bullioh previous was in the TDFL, Tallangatta League, and they won one premiership, lost a couple, and then at the late 70s probably started to struggle with playing numbers and things like that. So they amalgamated with Tallangatta to form Tallangatta Valley. Several years later, they stopped playing at Bullioh, which was, there's reasons for, reasons against, which is probably disappointing. It still should be Tallangatta Valley. But when we reformed, part of the proposal, the only way that we could reform and enter a competition, we had to enter a different league, and the Upper Murray suited perfectly. So we're very fortunate. Gordon Nicholas and the people in the Upper Murray supported our bid, and it was blocked originally. I think Bullioh and Burnsy went to Melbourne and took it the appeals, and it was overridden. And we won the right to join the Upper Murray, and 23, 24 years later, we're still going, which is great.
I remember when it was all happening, it was quite exciting. I do remember, now that you've brought up Bullioh and Burnsy, I do remember like all this stuff going on behind the scenes, because I was still in Toolangatta Valley at the time, and there was a lot of thoughts around, why are we having a football club here? We're like, there's one in town. Like, we've just like, and it just didn't feel like it could be real, if that makes sense, because like I'd played tennis down there at the courts, and that felt like my hub at the time. But the fact that I think there would have been a lot of doubters there, because I know even myself was sort of doubting like the potential of a place when there's, everyone's already been playing, half an hour down the road or anything like that. The recruitment drive and everything like that, like Bullioh now, to reflect upon, whenever I talk to anyone that has played out at Bullioh, they talk about it so fondly. Like, it's such a little community hub. Everyone gets all big hug around them, and that's obviously a big part of how the volunteers drive that. So you guys should be very proud of yourself.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, it's look, we pretty high on culture and standards and things like that. And if you're part of the team, it's very welcoming, and that's something that we're all very proud of. That there might be the odd one that says bad things about Bullioh, but that'd be like any club. But generally, the feedback's really positive. But I know, like early years, they worked extraordinarily hard to get it going, but there was a lot of excitement, and a lot of people jumped on board. But as the years progress, probably all clubs would, find the same. It becomes harder and harder. Got to continually create excitement and keep driving the standards to keep people wanting to come and things like that. So, but amazing success story. When country footy, there's probably more clubs folding. I don't think there's many clubs that have reformed, so we're certainly well known for that, and it's been a great success story.
So did Bullioh come back into the Upper Murray League with a netball team as well? Because I don't recall growing up whether netball and football were so closely aligned with the, I guess, quote-unquote football clubs, because that has happened over the last decade, that Federal were playing in the netball, and Corryong had a netball team. I can't remember the netball teams growing up living in Corryong actually being tied into the club culture.
Yeah, it's probably you to have a better idea than myself, but at the time when they first ended, I don't think there was netball associated with the football clubs. I'm not 100% sure because I wasn't there. Mel would probably know better than me, but I know certainly Bullioh pushed hard to get netball, to be reinstated and play alongside the Saturday comp football, because I know Corryong had a huge netball competition up there on Sundays. Reserves football was another one. There was no reserves football when we entered the league, and it's something we've been really passionate about and pushed that, and there's been reserves, I think, most of the years since we come into the competition. So, I think that, having the netball with the football's a no-brainer, and it certainly makes the day a whole lot more enjoyable, and all the families and that there. So it's probably in certain aspects the netball has really driven the standards.
That's how I felt being now away from the league, just from the media and the excitement around it and the pictures that I would see on social media. It just seemed like it had become so ingrained in the day. And just from I guess a lack of a better term, a practical point of view, if you were a family and you had children playing both, or young adults playing both, you basically had to split your time and travel a few hundred metres between both. You didn't have the option to float around and watch everything in one place, which I think growing up in a country town is pretty important. I don't think I would have seen my mates over the colder months and the wetter months in Corryong if it hadn't have been for playing football. It was the main reason I turned up.
I'm going to share. So it must have happened fairly quickly, because there wasn't long after Bullioh started that I was playing netball with Emma. And I remember, we were definitely underage, but there was just the fun around it, the fun and the excitement. And one thing that I will reflect on is how much everyone was all included. So there's other clubs that I've worked with, and even if netball and football are happening at the same place per se, they still seem quite separate. Whereas this was a very much a we're all in this. We'd all catch a bus to get, because bloody Tumba Rumba.
Yeah, that was a trip.
There's the Upper Murray League has a lot of distance involved to travel. Like Bullioh is very fortunate that it's quite close to out of town, but we'd all catch the bus up and catch the bus back, and everyone would just be in it together. And I just remember it was such an inclusive little vibe where the netballers and the footballers were all sort of just hanging out it was quite small then too. So there probably wasn't any other space at Bullioh for us to be. But yeah, it was definitely all sort of working, and the going up to the Corryong people with two heads and everything was all an experience. We'd all sit there on the bus and just be ready for what would happen. Basically.
Yeah, well, I'd left before Bullioh were in, so I never got to make up I never got to shade Bullioh as a federal player.
No, it was a very good time, and I can see though, like I've done a lot of volunteering too, and the volunteerism type thing, unless that's like ingrained in you, it can become quite draining. That the same people sort of tend to do the big roles and put their hand up for the jobs, and it just sort of starts to become an expectation rather than appreciation sometimes, or it can feel like that, even though I think if you sort of maybe stepped away, people would show all this glory and light on you and really like appreciate to your face. But when you're in the grind of doing stuff and just trying to get stuff done, it can sort of feel like that. And I think you guys, from what I've seen, like you are still innovating. Like they do the BnS now. So they've taken on from when the primary school, when I was there, we had the Stockman's Ride. So that was a thing that was, again, you had to raise money if you wanted to do things, and we got to do lots of things because we'd put in the effort. Like there was like 10 sets of parents, and they'd put on the Tallangata Valley Stockman's Ride, which is a big event.
Yeah.
And generate all this money, and because of that we got to go and have these massive trips that the parents never had to pay for because school just paid for it. And then Bullioh's now putting on the BnS. They've taken over the Stockman's Ride. The amount of effort that must go into getting those things to work, it can't just be you. There's a big driving force behind that. Would you like to sort of just paint a bit of a picture about how you feel about the people maybe around you that are really still making it? Maybe it's not an easy job to be president, or maybe it's just that you're the only one that hasn't been able to find a replacement for yourself, because that's usually the way that it goes.
Yes.
If you don't,
I saw that happen at the Bandits. I think Steve Wright did a couple more years than he was initially planning.
Yeah, look, finding a president of any club, not just Bullioh's, tough, and I've got the utmost respect for anyone that puts their hand up and does the job, because it can be very, very challenging. Look, the job at Bullioh is very rewarding. The off-season events, like you mentioned, the Tallangata Valley Stockman's Ride and the BnS Ball, probably, that do make the job a lot bigger than your standard football club, because, running major events outside of a footy season. But having said that, they're the reasons we've got a new building and new netball courts. The money we've raised from those events, is the reason that we've been able to put up, large amounts of money to get the funding that's required from state government and such. In terms of the volunteers, there's so many. I won't try to name any, because you always forget someone and you offend people. I've learnt that over a long period. But, we have a great volunteer base. We have a great club, a strong club. The Stockman's Ride, there was over 80 volunteers for that event. Actually, my wife, she organises the rosters, does an amazing job. But if people will always put their hand up if they're asked and it's organised. If you try and organise things last minute, can you do it? It won't work. But if you're organised and grateful when people do show up, like people say there's no volunteers out there anymore, which I'm sure there's less, but if you organise and ask these people early, can you help for an hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, I generally find most people will still put their hand up. The BnS ball, it's similar. You need about 80 to 100 people to run it. But look, it's not everyone's cup of tea. It is a different event. I'd never been to a BnS until we started hosting our own. But a lot of people enjoy it. It's fun. It's something different. So,
can you tell me about the conversation around getting that happening? Because I also had never been to a BnS until I was part of it. How did it get pitched? And yeah, like it's not the usual sort of thing that you would like. It makes sense that Stockman's right. It's already happening there. And that's just taking that on but to put on a BnS is firstly, it's a big gutsy step.
Look, it's for years. Actually, I was cleaning out a drawer the other day, and I was going back through the minutes of a meeting, and for years it was stating, we need to find fundraisers away from sponsor. Need different money coming into the club. So it would always come up. We need a new idea, a new way to raise money. Pete Patton, Claude Patton, and Libby, they floated the idea. 100%. Pete, I think, was a bit of an avid BnS goer.
Yeah,
so
that makes sense now. Yep.
He brought it to the committee, Libby and Claude as well. Like I said, it was a gutsy move because first up you're thinking you've got to come up with 20 grand.
I was going to say outlay. Initially
to host it. That's minimum. Like if no one shows up, you're going to lose 20 grand. So people were hesitant. I always thought it would be a winner, so I was happy to go along with this suggestion that we should have a go.
Yeah.
I think John Campbell ran a BnS or was part of a BnS out at Holbrook as well. They started one up. So he was someone that we spoke to as well. And we just thought, well, why not? We'll give it a go if, we come up short. And I think we've hosted 4 or 5. I can't remember the exact figure. We've had the last few years cancelled from COVID. But we've made money every year. It's been a great event. We've had, touchwood, no one gets seriously injured or anything like that, which is always a concern because it is different. But yeah, gutsy move, and congratulations to everyone that put their hand up to be involved with it. It's been good.
I would say it's like going to the zoo and like all the animals like talk to you. Basically, it's like you haven't paid to get in, but you're there and you're working in amongst them. And when I say that, I actually say that with utmost respect, because I will say the amount of people that go to a BnS, if you had that group of people together in Albury or anything like that, the amount of fights and everything and trouble that you would have would be ridiculously high. Whereas in my experience, yes, there's been like the odd troublemakers, but they're all very polite to you. They're only there to really have fun and blow off a bit of steam. Yes, you have to obviously manage it per se, but I was very surprised personally of how well-mannered everyone was, which is not my experience when I've been around big groups of people in sort of metro type areas.
Yeah, I think there's a general feeling when you're at the event that people are very grateful that you've put it on. Like we try and put the best event on possible and do everything right. So you'd like to think that they've come along and they've had a good time, but they are generally always very grateful, like Mel said. It's a different crowd, but they're happy to be there. They have a good weekend. We've got it coming up the last Saturday in February again this year, so we need to pump it up and we need to get at least 500 people along to that to make it worthwhile. So hopefully it'll be a big success. We haven't had it for a couple of years because of COVID. So yeah, we look forward to hosting a great event in February.
So we might just bring it back into town. Where do you see local tennis heading, either from your role or just in general? And what has you most excited about tennis around here at the moment?
To be honest, COVID has been pretty hard on Albury-Wodonga tennis. 2018-19 season, tennis on the border was in a great shape, but certainly it has knocked numbers around. Saturday pennant in Albury is a concern. It's been such a strong competition for, however many years, go back 50, 60 years, all the grass courts have been full. So it's something we need to work hard to, try and get players back to work in that, to play on Saturday. the introduction of night comp or twilight comps in Wodonga has been really successful with their Tuesday night men's comp and the Thursday night twilight. What's got me most excited, hopefully, just a continuation. I'm just so big on improvements to facilities, Wodonga is such a phenomenal facility over there, but it needs more money spent, but there's talk that, we may come into some funding in the next, 2 to 3 years. So with, upgrades to fencing and stuff like that, just really tidy it up, some things with the clubhouse as well. We're very fortunate. We've got Trish Moore running the Albury Tennis Association at the moment. She's down there doing some phenomenal things. If you went down to the Margaret Court Cup today, it's a hive of activity. So there is some great things happening, but it's like any sport. You just need to work hard. Whoever works the hardest, sporting clubs, you get the best results. It's that simple. If you sit back and expect people to turn up, it just doesn't happen. So hard work, and hopefully we can keep it going for many years to come.
So do you have your eye on a young apprentice that you're going to mentor the way Murray mentored you? Is there someone that you are looking at? You don't have to name them, but is like
got his son Will.
Oh,
yeah.
There you go.
Hopefully Willie's is smarter than his father and goes on and gets a
becomes a doctor or something,
university degree or something after school. But look, it's probably my biggest downfall is that I haven't gone down that path and employed an apprentice because the work's so seasonal. It does make it hard, winter time to try and carry staff through. So I know I haven't got one earmarked, but like I said, it's probably my biggest downfall that I should have taken someone under my wing and trained them up and, probably worked as hard as I have, because it is starting to get a bit challenging. But anyway, who knows what's around the corner.
So I just want to reiterate now just the magnitude of what you've just said. So you've got Emma at home, you've got Will, little boy, Poppy, little beautiful little family, and you just really just reinforced to me the fact that you do the majority of this yourself. Like if anyone's sort of driving around this area and has a look at the magnitude and the size of the courts and the amount of stuff that's going on, for one person to be like not a team scenario, that's massive. So you've, like Emma and the kids at home, they're your own little team as well, because I know Emma often talks about, oh, you're off to Darwin or you're off to doing all these things. She must be a massive supporter of you, and that probably wouldn't be able to happen if you didn't have her at home.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Mel, I'll cut you off.
That's right.
She's been amazing support, like all the travel and things like that done over the journey. She's always supported that, and, it's been amazing to have that support. With the tennis club, having these two events, and like I said, I probably do 80-90% of it myself, which, is probably crazy, really. Yeah. But, you look at the phenomenal success with the Big Bash at the Lavington, the ground was phenomenal to pitch, but 4 hours cricket, all the resources, money, everything that was spent, to get that up for 4 hours. And then, we've got two facilities, Wodonga, 150 hours compared to 4. Yeah. And, so it probably...
The amount of people that are coming to stay in the area for that really needs a bit of reflection, hey?
Yeah, like at the moment in Wodonga, the national, so people, the best junior kids from all over the country, and they've come from Perth. So it's both parents coming, the brothers, they're in town, so all the motels are full. The Margaret Court Cup, we've got 10 different nations represented, playing at that event. So it is big, huge for the community. You just hope people wish people would support it more in terms of. Not so much councils, but, motels and things like that. I know we can't have the event without the people having that accommodation, but, like it wouldn't be, a sign on a fence or something like that for, a motel that's always full because of tennis at this time of year wouldn't be a hard ass, I wouldn't have thought.
I think there needs to be a bit of a reflection on the bigger picture. So it's not just the tennis courts that would benefit. It's the greater community, really. And if you're on council right now, and I know a few people on council, and again, things don't happen quickly. You might have the best new councillors or committee or something come through, but it doesn't mean that an idea won't be immediately accepted. There's a bit of a grind sometimes that comes with innovating and changing what we've always done, per se.
Yeah, like I said, the biggest hold up for assistance down at the grass courts is the fact that the land is privately owned. So I fully understand that, but it's, if we do lose that facility, for example, Albury, we just lose our identity as a tennis, a town, because everything that's associated with tennis in Albury is based down there. We have some great other clubs in town, sure, but in terms of the capabilities of hosting major events, they don't come close because they're so small. We just need facilities of that magnitude to survive.
Righto, mate. Well, thank you, Shayne, for spending some time with us today. I know, given that the fortnight that this interview fell in, you couldn't probably be any busier than you are right at the moment, so we appreciate the time. I'm sure our audience does as well. And I do have one last question. You said you're not watching tennis as much. Is there a young player on the tour, the professional tour, male or female, that has you excited and actually has you turning the TV on every time they're playing?
Well, there was, and she retired too, and that was Ash Barty. So, look, I couldn't. Look, everyone loves watching Rafa. I'm not a Novak fan at all. I hope he doesn't win the Australian Open. But, yeah, I couldn't name one that stands out, to be honest. I'd be just as happy to go down and watch the kids play today, and, I'll sit back and enjoy that. But, yeah, Ash Barty, absolutely. She was phenomenal, but she's out of the game and she's expecting her first child, so that's exciting for her.
That's amazing. And I am a Novak fan, so this episode's not going out now.
That was the close bond between Craig and Josh, was the Novak link there. And it was very interesting talking strategies and stuff like that with Craig, and I appreciate his time as well. But I absolutely appreciate your time. This, for anyone listening, has been probably more than a year coming, I would say. I've occasionally, in crossing paths with Shayne, I've just mentioned that I do something like this and I would like to talk to him. I don't know whether he thought I was serious or not. And then we were going to do something and then he was busy, and then I probably would have been a good opportunity for you to be too busy now. But I really appreciate you making the effort so that we can get this out and people can know how impressive you are and you're right here on our doorstep.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, mate. Cheers.
Thank you.